Alright, so what is up guys? It's your man, Wardog3 here, and welcome to my guide on Ace Combat 8 for rookies, or as we in the community affectionately call them, Nuggets. For those who are new to the series and watching this video, I would like to welcome you aboard. You are embarking on a journey into an action-packed yet story-driven fighter jet game with lots of history. For those who don't know me, I have been a huge fan of the series and have played nearly every installment in the series, starting with Ace Combat 4, released in 2001 on the PS2. This video is going to be jam-packed with tips, pearls, and wisdom that I have as a veteran of the series. It is also designed to be a reference guide that you can refer back to at any time if you need help with Ace Combat 8. So without wasting any more of your valuable time, let's get into it. The first and perhaps most crucial tip I have, and that I believe many other Ace Combat veterans would recommend, is that upon opening Ace Combat 8, you must immediately change your flight system from standard to expert, and I'm going to show you why. As you can see here in the side-by-side, on the left is expert controls and the right is standard. Expert clearly affords you so much more maneuverability and far less restriction, which is extremely important if you plan to have adventures into Ace Combat's player versus player setting. Trust me, you will get smoked on standard controls in multiplayer. Playing right from the get-go on Expert will make your life so much easier, you will enjoy Ace Combat so much more, and be a much better player in the end. The second tip that I have is that if you have Ace Combat 7, I highly recommend playing it. Ace Combat 7's engine and flight model will be very similar to Ace Combat 8, even if the aircraft are known to feel slightly heavier in Ace Combat 8, so you will feel right at home in terms of the flight model, weapons, and overall feel and atmosphere of the game. Now, if you're worried about starting with the 8th numbered game in the series and feeling out of order story-wise, fear not. Each Ace Combat game has a story contained within that game. I liken it to the Persona numbered games. You can easily play Persona 5 before Persona 4, as each game is a different, self-contained story, even if they occur in the same setting/world. Speaking of which, the Ace Combat series takes place in the world of Strange Reel. And the reason it is called Strange Reel is because it looks very much like our real world, albeit looking a little strange. There are things you will recognize, such as Antarctica and the Pacific and Arctic Oceans, and things you will not recognize, such as completely different looking continents, which are central to the game's wars that take place. For example, Ace Combat 8 will be taking place on the continent of Usea in the year 2029, between the countries of the FCU, noted here, and Satoa, noted here. Now, although this is a self-contained conflict, other conflicts have taken place on Usea before, including Ace Combat 4 and the recent release of Ace Combat 7. So, events from 7 will likely be relevant here for Ace Combat 8, yet another reason why I recommend playing it. And then in the other Ace Combat games, such as Ace Combat 5, this has taken place on some of the other continents, primarily on Veruza in the country of Yuktobania, but some events also took place in North Osea. Speaking of which, if you pre-ordered Ace Combat 8, you get Ace Combat 0, which also takes place in the continent of North Osea, primarily in the countries of Belka and Ustio, shown here. So as you can see, the games are interconnected by the same world that they share, however, each individual game has its own self-contained conflict. So, if Ace Combat 8 is your first game, do not worry that you will be completely lost because you haven't played the first 7 games. One other important note is that many of the game's conflicts are allegories to the real world. Ace Combat 0 heavily parallels World War II, and I highly recommend pre-ordering Ace Combat 8 to get that experience, as it is a phenomenal game, Ace Combat 0 that is. Ace Combat 5 simulates a war between the USA and Russia. We will see what Ace Combat 8's conflict represents. And personally, that is all I believe you need to know as story background for Ace Combat 8. Once you play through the game, after it releases, I then recommend further studying the lore and really enveloping yourself in the game's world. The next piece of advice I have is that when you unlock access to it in the Ace Combat 8 campaign, immediately look at the aircraft tree and plan out your path to your favorite plane. For example, if it is the YF-23, go to it on the aircraft tree and backtrack from it to find out what path of unlocks you will need to fly it. Or if you are a fan of the F-22, do the same. The idea here is that by prioritizing your progression, you can make sure you get to fly your favorite plane While also not spreading yourself too thin and locking yourself out of the higher tier planes you will likely need for the later missions of the game. This next tip may seem obvious, but enjoy your first playthrough. Ace Combat players have a tendency to be gluttons for punishment, some may call them masochists, so do not worry about getting all S ranks and doing it on Ace or the hardest difficulty. This will come with time and experience. And finally, my last piece of advice to round out my non-combat tips is the public service announcement that because the Ace Combat 8 campaign will be largely taking place on a carrier, many of the missions will restrict you to carrier-based aircraft. In the Ace Combat world, this is mainly the F-14, F-18, and F-35 families, as well as the Su-33, Rafale, and F-4. Regarding that last one, the E model is technically the Air Force variant, although the F-4 had carrier-based variants. There may be other planes, but we will see when the game launches, so keep these aircraft restrictions in mind out there. It is believed this restriction will only be for the initial playthrough. Now we are going to get into the more combat-based tips that I have for the game. Basically, there are two main types of missions in the Ace Combat campaign. The first is score attack, which involves destroying a certain amount of targets within a time limit, as denoted in the upper left by the quota, here being 30,000 points. The other type is objective missions, which usually do not have a quota, and this is reflected in the upper left with a general score, and usually involves destroying specific targets, usually noted in red, or protecting a specific target, known as an escort mission. I mention these differences as if you are in a score attack mission, judicious use of ammunition and conservation techniques are often needed. We will talk about this in a little bit. Before every Ace Combat mission is a mission briefing. Pay attention to these. They often clue you in on what type of aircraft you need to bring. In this briefing shown here, for example, with 243 ground targets and only 8 air targets, this briefing is basically screaming to bring an A-10 or some other air-to-ground focused aircraft. Speaking of which, there are 4 plane types in Ace Combat 8. Fighters, such as the F-22, which specialize in air-to-air combat or dogfighting other planes, and do so by carrying specialized missiles, which we will talk about shortly. There are also attackers, such as the A-10, which specialize in air-to-ground combat like bombing runs and attacking targets on the ground, known as close air support, and carry a plethora of bombs, rockets, and other munitions to carry out this role. Multi-roles such as the F-4 are a blend of fighters and attackers that can do both roles equally well and carry balanced weaponry, good for mixed missions of air and ground targets. And finally, there are jammers like the EA-18G that use electronic warfare for supporting combat operations. Their electronic warfare systems can boost the performance of your weapons while hindering the performance of enemies. While in the hangar, you can see the plane's stats, which are overall all fairly self-explanatory. The name of the stat tells you exactly what it means. The parts, which can improve the plane's stats and performance of your weapons, including the ammunition supply, and your aircraft's loadout. Focusing in on this, on the left you can see the loadout that is the same across all aircraft: gun, missile, and flares. Guns are your machine guns, a fast-firing weapon good for close range that can be used on both air and ground targets. Do not ignore these, more on this later. MSSL are your standard missiles, which can lock onto both air and ground targets. They deal damage, have average tracking or homing capabilities, and have no special properties. And finally, we have FLR, which are your flares that can be used to throw off tracking of missiles if you want to continue attacking a target through a bombing run, or be used if you are in a vulnerable position where you know missiles will hit you after performing a maneuver. Then, moving to the weapons on the right, these are the special weapons, which are different across all aircraft and largely depend on the aircraft type as discussed earlier. In addition to your guns, missiles, and flares, you get to pick 1 or 2 of these. Ace Combat 8 gives you the option to take 2 at the cost of reduced ammo for each. Prior to Ace Combat 8, however, you are only able to select 1 of these. The abbreviations stand for a different type of weapon, and I am now going to go over all of these abbreviations and weapons to show you how to best use them and which are usually the most worth using. First, we will start with the air-to-air weapons. The SAM, or SAAM, stands for Semi-Active Air-to-Air Missile, meaning you need to guide your missile to the target by keeping it in the circle. These are useful against long-range targets or if your aircraft is handicapped by needing to stay below a certain altitude and allow you to hit targets out of reach. They are less ideal for multiplayer, however, as they are slow and leave you quite vulnerable. Also, the SAM can reacquire its lock if you have to break lock temporarily, as you see here. A quick tip. QAMs, QAAMs, or Quick Maneuver Air-to-Air Missiles, are best described as a beefed-up standard missile. They were completely busted in Ace Combat 4 and have increased homing and can lock onto aircraft in positions that standard missiles cannot. I highly recommend these. HPAAs, or High Power Air-to-Air Missiles, are exactly as the name suggests. They trade increased power for reduced homing, having double the power of standard missiles, and are best against non-agile fortified targets like bombers, but with enough skill can be used against more nimble targets. These are another great choice. HVAAs, or High Velocity Air-to-Air Missiles, are kind of like sniper missiles. They're very fast and prevent evasive maneuvers. As you can see in the footage, they hit this boss quickly and easily, whereas the standard missiles that I fire afterward didn't move fast enough and were easily dodged by the aircraft. SASMs, SASMs, or Short-Range Aerial Suppression Missiles, are good for maneuverable targets. They have solid power with a direct hit, but will burst if the missile is coming at a bad angle and would otherwise miss. This is useful for player versus player multiplayer and ensures you can put damage down on hostile opponents.
Enemy locked on.
Ooh, he survived the SASM, the burst.
LAMs, LAAMs, or Long Range Air-to-Air Missiles, have extremely long range. As seen here, they can lock on from 35,000 feet away, far exceeding other missiles. These are a solid choice. Multi-target air-to-air missiles come in many different flavors, including 4, 6, and even 8. These are good for shooting down immobile air targets like helicopters and bombers, or big boss ships, as seen here, for quick and widespread damage. A somewhat advanced technique with these missiles is using them to ripple fire, meaning you fire them with a delay in conjunction with your standard missiles. This makes it very hard for your target to evade, sort of sandwiching them between missiles as seen here, making it easier to down bosses and elite enemies. HCAAs, or High Capacity Air-to-Air Missiles, are basically just extra missiles. Objectively speaking, it's not really useful to carry bonus missiles with no additional functionality, and so I usually don't recommend this special weapon. Okay, so that covers the functionality of all the air-to-air weapons. Now let's talk about the air-to-ground weapons and how to best use them. First, we have the RKTs, or rockets, which can be used in multiple ways. Either spread fire for hitting several dispersed targets, or concentrated fire for heavily armored targets like this aircraft carrier here. Overall, their dual function makes this a versatile air-to-ground weapon. Multi-target air-to-ground missiles come in the 4 and 8 variety, but not 6 like the air-to-air missile counterpart. Personally, 4 are more useful than 8, as 8 have redundant lock-ons, meaning they will lock on twice to a target that only requires one missile to destroy. These are good precision targeting due to their smart feature of rising up before striking their target, but are also fairly good all-purpose missiles and are commonly carried by aircraft. I really like these.
Did they pick up Count's aircraft? Wait a sec, don't go blaming me.
UGBs, or unguided bombs, are good all-purpose spread bombs with solid power and range, useful against both land targets and ships. These are my personal favorite air-to-ground weapon due to their supreme versatility. They're really good in any air-to-ground situation. In fact, these were so good in Ace Combat Infinity's multiplayer that they actually had to be nerfed. So let that say what it will. LASMs, LASMs, or long-range anti-ship missiles, are exactly as the name suggests. Great ship killers and take a flight path that dodges their interception by CIWS. They are wonky against land targets, however, so I'd caution you against using them in those scenarios. These are excellent missiles in Ace Combat's classic Destroy the Fleet missions, as shown here, Mission 11 in Ace Combat 7, conveniently known as Fleet Destruction. Expect to have at least one of these in every Ace Combat game, and these missiles work great for that.
They're already firing. They think they can hit us. Make a low approach or dive to avoid their fire when you move in.
LACMs, or long-range cruise missiles, are basically like a better LASM. These are literal mini nukes. Only one is needed to destroy the heaviest armored ships, such as this carrier, for example. These are extremely strong, but limited aircraft carry them. Otherwise, I could not recommend them more.
All ships, prepare for anti-air combat.
Finally, LAGMs, or long-range air-to-ground missiles, are like the little brother of the LASM and the LACM. They're basically like a lock-on UGB with longer range and a blast radius. Also good for sniping ground targets, similar to the SAAM in the air. As they are similar to the UGB, this special weapon also got nerfed in Ace Combat Infinity's multiplayer for being too strong. And, to no one's surprise, I like these a lot as well. GPBs, or Guided Penetration Bombs, are like a UGB, with increased power but reduced blast radius. Unfortunately, they had limited usefulness in Ace Combat 7, but will probably be good against the land battleships that we will see in Ace Combat 8. SFFS, say that 10 times quickly, or self-forging fragment submunitions, are like a powered-up UGB. They can be dropped at high altitude for widespread and low damage, or at low altitude for concentrated damage. I recommend the latter use, as these pack a serious punch, almost like a pack-a-punch UGB, if you will. XSDB, or Advanced Small Diameter Bombs, are a relatively new weapon to the Ace Combat series. They are best described as like a 4 AGM with a slight blast radius. Because they function similarly to the 4 AGM with the added benefit of a blast radius, I tend to like these, especially since they are on the F-22 in Ace Combat 7. SOD, SOD, or standoff dispensers are the opposite and have been around for quite some time. Unfortunately, they are tough to use as they only strike in a straight line, so it is very time-consuming positioning yourself appropriately. I usually don't recommend these. FAEBs, FAEBs, or fuel-air explosive bombs, are a famous and iconic Ace Combat weapon. Historically, one of the most powerful. Previously, they did massive damage with massive range, allowing you to bomb anything, including air targets in Ace Combat 0, as I show here.
Attack on XBO. XBO must be destroyed. I must be slowing down. My gauges are going crazy. Friendly aircraft. These are Sapin fighters.
But now are more of a low damage, large blast radius weapon. They're still good, however, and great for taking out large groups of unfortified targets. Finally, we have the other special weapons, which don't fit squarely in an air-to-air or air-to-ground category. Now, there have been reports that energy weapons are missing or won't be featured prominently in Ace Combat 8. However, I will still cover them here in the event they are added later in terms of weapons for the DLC planes, for example. PLSL, or pulse lasers, are best described as an energy machine gun. Keep your target in the reticle and they will be deleted very quickly. These are a very powerful, great all-purpose weapon for both air and ground targets, but an important note is that they can't penetrate clouds. This is important to mention as the developers are doubling down on the clouds for Ace Combat 8. EML, the electromagnetic launcher, or more simply a railgun, is a one-shot kill on many targets. Basically, just point and shoot. Highly irritating in player versus player multiplayer. In fact, so much so, this special weapon is one of the reasons that I do not play Ace Combat 7's multiplayer. MGP, or the machine gun pod, is an additional machine gun that can be strapped to your aircraft. This is somewhat of an exclusive to the MiG-21 and very powerful in the right hands, as in conjunction with your standard guns, targets can be down blisteringly quickly. ECM, or EWIS, IEWS, is electronic warfare support. This is probably best used as a support in player versus player multiplayer, greatly aggravating your opponents, by the way. and typically not a weapon you should carry on your own aircraft in campaign missions. Classically, it deflects missile locks, but more recent iterations of Ace Combat boost weapon homing, though its missile deflection ability now is questionable to say the least. Reportedly, this weapon is very effective when used by your wingman in Ace Combat 8, so I would recommend using it in those situations. TLS, or the Tactical Laser System, have unfortunately been heavily nerfed since earlier iterations of Ace Combat, where they used to be an insta-delete weapon. Now it is more so used as a focus fire weapon, kind of like a worse pulse laser, so I would recommend that over the TLS. TLS, also like pulse lasers, cannot penetrate through clouds, so keep that in mind out there. If you pre-ordered Ace Combat 8 and are getting Ace Combat 0, use it in that game, but it's probably not going to be good for Ace Combat 8. MPBM, or the Multi-Purpose Burst Missile. These have probably been nerfed the hardest of all the alternative weapons. Previously in Ace Combat 0 they used to destroy everything in sight, but now are more of a lock-on FAEB. Large area of effect, but very weak damage, especially compared to its first iteration in Ace Combat 0. It's really tough to recommend these based on its performance in Ace Combat 7, but I guess we'll see for Ace Combat 8. Well, that covers all the special weapons, so if you get good at mastering them, you will do very well in both the campaign missions and the multiplayer. Many of these special weapons are also in Ace Combat 0, being the pre-order bonus for Ace Combat 8. The special weapons in Ace Combat 0 that were not discussed are typically weapons that are not worth using, like the Napalm Bomb or Bomblet Dispenser. There are also weapons in Ace Combat 0 that go by different names, such as the XMAA and XLAA, but these are just the 4 AAM of the modern Ace Combat games. My personal favorite special weapons are the QAM and the 4 AAM for the air weapons, and the UGB 4-target air-to-ground missiles, long-range missile family including the LASM, LAGM, and LACM, self-forging fragment submunitions, and FAEBs or FABEs for the ground. Now I have some more general combat tips for you. One of the most common mistakes by Ace Combat noobs is relying too much on your standard missiles. Be sure to utilize the gun for targets and get good with it. It can destroy targets in positions that missiles can't, can often destroy targets quicker, and save you tons of missiles. That last part is important, as some missions in Ace Combat 7 are very long, and Ace Combat series in general. For example, this is from Mission 19 of my Ace Difficulty S-Rank walkthrough in Ace Combat 7. I started the mission with 3,600 gun rounds, 160 missiles, and 66 4 AAM as my special weapon, and ended with only 1,493 gun rounds, 6 missiles, and 5 4 AAM. Imagine what the mission would be like if I didn't use so much gun. Another great example is Mission 16A from my Ace Difficulty S-Rank walkthrough in Ace Combat 5. This one is notorious for running out of missiles. I started with 800 gun rounds, 80 missiles, and 14 XLAAs, which is a variant of the 4 AAM, and still had 6 missiles to spare by the end, but only had 195 gun rounds left. Hopefully this proves my point. My other tip regarding the gun is that you can shoot and hit targets from further away than you would think, even before the in-gun range reticle pops up, as I show here. You will get a feel for this with time. Another general combat tip I have is maintaining a 2-target to 1 special weapon usage target destruction ratio for your air-to-ground weapons. This is even better if you can destroy 3 or 4 targets for 1 special weapon, helping you conserve missiles for longer air-to-ground focused combat operations. As shown here, this is Mission 16B from my Ace Difficulty S-Rank walkthrough in Ace Combat 5, the air-to-ground equivalent mission I showed you earlier. You see me destroying 3 or more targets with a single SFFS bomb, and that enabled me that despite starting with 800 guns, 76 missiles, and 14 SFFS, with effective use of the gun and the SFFS, I had 189 guns, 6 missiles, and 1 SFFS remaining. In other words, didn't run out of ammunition for any of my weapons. Many Ace Combat players struggle to do this. I want to make sure that you don't. When it comes to shooting your standard missiles, due to their below average homing, almost always shoot them from the 6 o'clock position or right behind the enemy for maximum success chances. Head-on attacks can also work. You will get a feel for what the right shot is with experience. My tip is to make sure the enemy is truly head-on. These are more effective in older Ace Combats like Ace Combat 0, though you can still pull it off in 7, and probably Ace Combat 8. Another big tip I have is don't mash the throttle. This is a common newbie error, and as you can see, makes it tough to acquire a good position on the target. My allies actually destroy the MiG-21s I attempt to destroy in this footage here, due to the ineffectiveness of trying to dogfight with the afterburners constantly held down. Instead of holding down the afterburners, utilize the high G turn, a newer feature in Ace Combat, as these aren't in older games like Ace Combat 0. By holding L2 and R2 together or the back bumpers and using your left joystick, you can quickly and tightly turn to position appropriately and quickly for an effective shot. As you can see from the example gameplay, I used this effectively in Ace Combat Infinity player vs. player multiplayer. You know you are doing the high G turn right when you see the increased burst of air, or white, over the wings. Make sure you spam this as much as you can. There's really no downside to using the high G turn. And I'd like to thank my friend RubyLight27, my friend, partner, and fellow Ace Combat veteran, for providing this tip to you guys, the audience. Now this may seem like an obvious tip, but it is important to be situationally aware, both in multiplayer and higher difficulties of the campaign in Ace Combat. In this gameplay footage, I am attempting to dogfight fighters in an A-10 in mission 18 plus of my Ace difficulty S-rank walkthrough for Ace Combat 5. Note that I am constantly aware of the multiple enemies on my tail via my radar, and keep moving and braking, never flying straight. The reason for this is that in Ace Combat 5 and the PS2 titles in general, including Ace Combat 0, getting hit by one missile on Ace difficulty makes you toast. So, what's the most effective way to dodge a missile? Well, I'm glad you asked. The most effective way to dodge a missile is to turn your aircraft 90 degrees, hit the afterburners or hold down the throttle, and pull down on the joystick or the left stick. This has an extremely low failure rate and is the best way for a beginner to dodge a missile until you get a better feel for how to dodge missiles. This also works in multiplayer, but does leave you exposed to gunfire. And then, if you can't dodge a missile, you have flares. Use these strategically, as you only get a limited amount. Weaker aircraft have more flares than stronger aircraft. In this example, I use it to continue my bombing run undeterred. Please note that flares aren't available in earlier Ace Combat games like Ace Combat 0. My final combat tip I have before we move on to the multiplayer tips is to not get greedy when playing the game. It can be tempting to go for that extra target while a missile is closing in on your tail, or to continue a bombing run when you are close to the ground, but remember that it isn't worth restarting the mission or losing your progress, even if newer Ace Combat games have checkpoints. As you can see here, I heed my own advice for the first time in history and bail out of a bombing run when I realize I am far too close to the ground and at risk of restarting a 20-minute long mission. In the older Ace Combat games, such as 5 in this case, and 0 if you pre-order Ace Combat 8, there were no checkpoints. So be aggressive, but smart. It will save you a lot of frustration. Had enough tips yet? Well, fortunately, I got more for you. This is going to be the guide to the multiplayer section, which will be featured prominently in Ace Combat 8. My first tip that I have is for you to find your favorite plane and upgrade it fully, so that you have a competitive plane while you work on upgrading some of the others. Though we don't know much about Ace Combat 8's multiplayer progression, I anticipate it will be very similar to Ace Combat Infinity. As you can see here, I have a level 20, the highest level F4, as my favorite aircraft to use, and is quite competitive being at the max level. From there, I can work on some of my other planes I want to fly that I enjoy, such as the YF-23, F-15, and so on and so forth. In Ace Combat 8's multiplayer, we know there will be two modes, player versus player and player versus enemy, or co-op. I recommend staying out of player versus player initially, as it isn't great for new players to the game, and is honestly often quite miserable. People run cancerous loadouts, as you can see here in Ace Combat 7, including souped up F-22s with electronic warfare active combined with the QAMs, and you can see these guys just get instantly deleted.
It's just everyone dies so fast.
Stick with player versus enemy, or PvE, which is more chill and cooperative with your teammates. However, if you have to compete in player versus player for some reason, my biggest piece of advice is actually courtesy of my father, who was an Air Force pilot. Utilize the vertical attack approach. Don't get trapped in a circle jerk, which is Ace Combat speak for two aircraft constantly turning in a circle in the horizontal plane, each braking harder and harder and harder in an attempt for one to outturn the other and get the coveted 6 o'clock lock. Rather, fly up to high altitude and strike from above, which makes dodging far more difficult. I am showing it to you here in Ace Combat Infinity in my F4, mitigating the problem of its low mobility, and to great effect. It works so well, myself and my partner Drift King completely smoked the enemy team, with Drift King getting the MVP, who also happened to be in an F4. For those who ask why I specifically mention the F4, and may be new to my channel, the F4 Phantom is my favorite aircraft. So if you also admire this plane, look forward to lots of gameplay of it for Ace Combat 8 if you haven't already seen it on this channel. This next comment is a huge tip and piece of advice for those who are new to their foray in Ace Combat multiplayer. Especially for beginners, beware of what we call seal clubbers. They're exactly as they sound, experienced players who club the baby seals, aka you new players. Unfortunately, this was a massive problem in Ace Combat Infinity, something I fought against actually, and with the return of co-op is likely to be a problem here again. In fact, this issue got so bad in Ace Combat Infinity, my fellow Ace Combat player Blaze33405, who you should subscribe to, actually took matters into his own hands, vigilante style, defeating these players and naming and shaming. Okay, now, some key tip-offs of a seal clubber include joining a room where there is only one player with a high matching rate, usually over 2,000 in Ace Combat Infinity, and their room may say scummy things like, "Beginner's welcome," even though this is far from the case. You always want to see rooms where people are a relatively similar matching rate. If yours is 1,500, people should be around 1,500, plus or minus like 100. There is one player way above the rest, consider this a red flag and leave. For example, my matching rate was in the high 1900s in Ace Combat Infinity, and here is a sample room where everyone is around the same range. Everything's all hunky-dory. Now let's say we change the matching rates to these numbers. This would be a huge warning there is a seal clubber leading your lobby. Be sure to protect yourself out there. These seal clubbers are bound to be out there and back for Ace Combat 8's multiplayer. They prey on new players, and so I am informing you now so that you are prepared. When it comes to co-op tips, synergize with your teammates for a balanced loadout. As you can see here, we have one fighter, one multi-role, and one attacker. This coordinates our attacks against all types of enemies. And in fact, as you can see, our team won the game convincingly.
Better start thinking about how you'll use that reward.
Earning the best scores in co-op multiplayer involves prioritizing the highest valued targets. In Ace Combat Infinity, this was denoted by 3 colors, red, orange, and yellow targets. Red being the highest, orange medium, and yellow low points. Here, my team isn't down by much, less than 5,000, and an SR-71 worth 6,000 points spawns in, so I prioritized that. Unfortunately, my teammate makes a mistake and pursues this plane while I am also pursuing it, and so we lose valuable points, as my teammate is not attacking targets that he otherwise could be attacking. And so I give another tip in the co-op multiplayer. Attack targets your enemies are attacking, and leave your teammates alone if they are attacking or marked to attack a target you're looking at. You don't want instances where you use your valuable special weapons and then your teammate blows them up with burst missiles. Like this, and this, and this, and this.
Yup.
My last tip is to prioritize investing in multi-roles first. For example, in Ace Combat Infinity, I upgraded my multi-role F4E to level 20, the highest level, over the attacker F4G. There are many reasons for this. One is the versatility. In Ace Combat Infinity, multi-roles had more part slots, improving the ability to upgrade the plane. Multi-roles also did not suffer a damage penalty when attacking targets of the opposite role. In short, attackers faced damage and homing penalties for their missiles against air targets and vice versa for fighters and ground targets. It is unknown whether this will be the case in Ace Combat 8 multiplayer online. However, for a beginner, multi-roles do not have to worry about these issues and can run an air-to-ground special weapon while being solidly effective at attacking high-value air targets. This is why multi-roles dominated the landscape of Ace Combat Infinity. I suspect it will be no different in Ace Combat 8. As you can see here, my highest scores and average scores in the game came from multi-roles, such as the F4, Su-47, and F-15 SMTD. However, you can make any plane viable. I still achieved high scores in the F-117, an attacker, as well as a YF-23, a fighter. At the end of the day, have fun, but part of having fun is doing well. Multi-roles are most likely to get you there, especially as a beginner. Well, this is it in terms of all the tips I have, but I don't want them to end here. I would like to encourage everyone to make this a living video. In other words, if you have any tips for our fellow new Ace Combat players joining the Skies, please drop them down below. Conversely, fellow Nuggets, if you have any questions for our vets, including me, please drop those questions in the comment section down below so we can help you out. Finally, to end the video, I want to make mention that this will be your one-stop shop for all Ace Combat 8 content. I will be posting my signature S-Rank Ace difficulty walkthrough, Ace Combat 8 online aircraft guides and reviews, and much, much more, in partnership with my friend Ruby Light, who will also be posting some of these aircraft guides and reviews. So be sure to subscribe to him. He already has some great content already, especially as it pertains to Ace Combat 7. I look forward to seeing everyone in the skies of Ace Combat 8. War Dog 3 out.